If you've ever had that weird feeling that someone was making important decisions that affect you directly, but you only found out after everything was already decided, stop whatever you're doing, because this video could completely change your life. What I'm about to show you are 5 clear signs that a wrong decision is being hidden from you, and if you recognize at least 3 of them, you need to take action today. Have you ever had that feeling that something wasn't right, but couldn't explain what? You know when you notice that people around you are acting strange, avoiding eye contact, changing the subject when you come near, or simply leaving you out of important conversations? Well, that's not your paranoia. In fact, these are very clear signs that decisions are being made behind your back, and the worst part is that these decisions will probably harm you in some way. That moment when you realize that everyone knows something you don't is one of the most distressing feelings there is. And what's worse is when you discover that this thing everyone knew was exactly a decision that was going to change your life, and you were the last person to know. This happens much more often than you think, and it happens in all areas of our lives. At work, in the family, in relationships, with friends, and even with professionals who should be on our side. And the first sign, which is also the most obvious but everyone ignores, is first sign: secret meetings have started happening. Have you noticed that people have started having whispered conversations that stop the moment you appear? Or those meetings that always happen when you're not present, and when you ask what it was about, everyone says, "It was nothing important," or "just work stuff." You know that feeling you've had when you enter a room and everyone gets a bit awkward, as if they were talking about you? Well, that's not normal, and I'll explain why. When people start meeting without you to discuss matters that directly involve you, it's because they've already made a decision and are trying to figure out the best way to tell you, or worse, they're trying to find a way to implement this decision without you noticing. This happens because when people know a decision will upset or harm you, they naturally start avoiding direct confrontation. So they get together to plan how they'll handle your reaction, how they'll justify the decision, or even how to make sure you don't find out until it's too late to do anything. At work, this could be a planned termination, a role change, a project being taken away from you, or even a reorganization that will harm you. In the family, it could be a decision about inheritance, about caring for a family member, or about changes that will affect the family dynamic. In relationships, it could be about breaking up, moving to another city, or important financial decisions. What you need to understand is that honest people who truly care about you will always include you in discussions that affect you. When they start excluding you from these conversations, it's because they know you won't like what they decided. If this has happened to you, leave a comment sharing how you overcame it and help more people. And if you're going through this now, don't worry, because by the end of this video you'll know exactly what to do. Second sign: people's behavior has changed drastically. You know that time you felt that people close to you started acting completely different than normal? Those who were once affectionate, attentive, and communicative suddenly became distant, avoiding eye contact, giving short and curt responses, or even avoiding being alone with you. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, "Wow, so-and-so has been really strange lately," or "It seems like everyone is acting kinda weird with me"? This isn't just your imagination. When people are hiding an important decision from you, they naturally feel uncomfortable in your presence because they know they're being dishonest. This discomfort manifests in various ways. Some people become overly friendly, trying to compensate for the guilt they're feeling. Others become aggressive and irritable because they're handling poorly the weight of deceiving you. And then there are those who simply pull away, avoiding contact with you as much as possible. What happens is that keeping a secret about someone you interact with daily is extremely draining. The person is torn between the loyalty they have for you and the loyalty they have for the group that made the decision. This internal tension ends up manifesting through behavioral changes that are very noticeable to those who know the person well. For example, at work, you might notice that your boss, who was always direct and transparent with you, suddenly started giving evasive answers when you ask about future projects, your performance or company changes. Or colleagues who were always close to you started avoiding having lunch together, no longer including you in informal conversations, or becoming uncomfortable when you're alone together. In family settings, you might notice that your parents or siblings are avoiding certain topics, changing the subject when you bring up specific themes, or showing unusual nervousness when you're together. In romantic relationships, your partner might be more physically distant, less communicative, or displaying behaviors that are completely different from their usual pattern. The reason this happens is simple. It's very difficult to act naturally when you're hiding something important from someone you see every day. The guilt, anxiety, and fear of being discovered cause the person to naturally change their behavior, even if they don't want to. Sound familiar? If you're thinking, wow, that's totally me, you're not alone. Millions of people go through this every day, and most don't realize it until it's too late. Third sign. Your opinions stop being asked for or considered. Have you noticed that people stopped asking what you think about matters they used to always consult you on? Or that when you give your opinion, people simply ignore it or quickly change the subject? If you're one of those people who was always consulted about important decisions, whether at work, in family matters, or in your social circle, and suddenly this stopped happening, be careful. This is a very clear sign that decisions are already being made without you, and your opinion isn't being considered because it might interfere with plans that have already been made. This happens because when people have already decided something they know you won't approve of, they naturally stop consulting you. After all, why ask your opinion if they already know you'll be against it? It's much easier to simply leave you out of the decision-making process than to deal with your questions and objections. In professional environments, this might manifest when you stop being invited to strategic meetings, when they stop asking for your analysis of important projects, or when your suggestions start being systematically ignored. If you were always someone whose ideas were valued, and suddenly this changed, it's very likely they're planning changes you won't like. In personal life, this can happen when your family stops consulting you about important decisions like moves, investments, or matters related to caring for other family members. If you've always been included in these discussions and are now being left out, it's probably because they've already decided something they know you'll question. In relationships, this shows up when your partner stops asking you about future plans, important financial decisions, or changes in your lives together. If they always consulted you before and now make decisions alone, it's a huge red flag. What you need to understand is that in any healthy relationship, whether professional, family, or romantic, people who truly care about you will always consider your opinion, especially on matters that directly affect you. When this stops happening, it's because they've already decided something and are trying to avoid the conflict your opposing opinion might cause. Have you ever heard them say this phrase, "Oh, we'll decide that later," or "No need to worry about that now"? Be careful. This is already a strong indication that the decision has been made, and they're just buying time to implement it without you noticing. And if you thought that was strong, just wait for the next sign that will shock you even more. Fourth sign. Information reaches you filtered. Remember that time you accidentally discovered important information that everyone else had known for a long time, and when you asked why nobody told you, the answer was, "Oh, we didn't want to worry you," or "We didn't think it was important for you to know." Have you ever found yourself learning important things through other channels, like overhearing a conversation by chance, seeing an email that wasn't meant for you, or being informed by someone outside your close circle? This isn't a coincidence. When people start filtering the information that reaches you, it's because they're trying to control what you know so you can't interfere with decisions that have already been made. This information filtering happens in various ways. Sometimes people simply omit important information. Other times they distort the information, telling only part of the story or presenting the facts in a way that minimizes their importance. And there are cases where they deliberately delay telling you, making sure you find out when it's already too late to do anything about it. At work, this could mean you're not being informed about company changes, reorganizations that might affect you, financial problems that could result in layoffs, or opportunities that might interest you. When your colleagues or boss start protecting you from information, it's usually because they don't want you to take any action that might disrupt their plans. In family, this can happen when there are discussions about financial matters, health issues, or the family's future, and everyone knows except you. If your family members start thinking you don't need to know certain things, it's very likely those things are decisions they know you'll question or try to change. In romantic relationships, information filtering might be about future plans, financial problems, matters related to your partner's work, or even conversations they've had with other people about your relationship. What you need to understand is that information is power. When people control what you know, they automatically control your options and your ability to make informed decisions about your own life. And this isn't protection, this is manipulation. Everyone pretends not to notice, but when you stop being informed about things that directly affect you, it's because someone doesn't want you to have the power to influence the situation. And that is extremely dangerous, because it means you're being kept in the dark on purpose. What I'm about to say will make you think of someone. Do you know that person who always says, "Let me handle this for you," or "You don't need to worry about these details"? Be very careful with that kind of person. Often this protection is actually a way to keep you away from the information you need to make your own decisions. But hold on, because the next sign will shock you even more than the ones I've already shown you. Fifth sign, you started being psychologically prepared. Now pay attention, because this next one could save your life. Have you noticed that people started making seemingly innocent comments about changes, about how sometimes life takes us down different paths, or about how it's important to be prepared for anything? If you started hearing phrases like, "You're very strong," "You always adapt well to changes," "You'll be fine no matter what happens," or "Life sometimes holds surprises for us," be careful. These aren't random words of encouragement. This is psychological preparation. When people know they're going to give you bad news, or that a decision that harms you is about to be revealed, they instinctively start preparing you emotionally for the impact. It's as if they're trying to soften the blow before even striking it. This psychological preparation can come in various forms. Sometimes they're compliments about your ability to overcome, as if they want to remind you that you're strong enough to handle what's coming. Other times they're comments about how changes can be positive, trying to create a positive mental association with something they know you'll initially see as negative. It can also happen through stories about other people who went through similar situations and ended up fine in the end. For example, if they're planning to fire you, you might start hearing stories about how so-and-so got fired and ended up finding an even better job. If they're planning to end a relationship, you might start hearing about how someone else got separated and is now much happier. Another common way is through conversations about life philosophy, about how everything happens for a reason, about how sometimes what seems bad at first ends up being a blessing, or about how changes are necessary for personal growth. What's happening here is that people are trying to create a mental state in you that's more receptive to the bad news. They want that when the bomb is dropped, you're already mentally prepared to accept the situation with less resistance. At work, this preparation might come through conversations about how the market is tough, about how the company is going through changes, or about how it's important to always be prepared for new opportunities. If your boss or colleague started having these conversations out of nowhere, it's very likely they're preparing you for a dismissal, a change in role, or some reorganization that won't benefit you. In the family, you might start hearing conversations about how everyone has to follow their own path, about how we can't always control what happens in life, or about how sometimes it's better for everyone to live their own life. If your family started philosophizing about independence and changes, it might be that they're preparing you for some decision that involves separation or significant changes in the family dynamic. In romantic relationships, this preparation can come through conversations about how people change, about how not all relationships last forever, or about how sometimes love isn't enough. If your partner has started having these philosophical conversations about relationships, it's a huge red flag. That weird feeling you get but can't explain when these conversations start happening is your instinct telling you that something isn't right. Our brain is very good at detecting inconsistencies, and when someone suddenly starts having deep conversations about change and moving on without an apparent reason, our subconscious mind notices that something is wrong. If you're thinking, "Wow, it was exactly the same for me," you need to pay close attention to what I'm going to tell you now about what to do when you identify these signs. But before I teach you exactly what to do, I need you to stop and do an honest reflection. How many of these 5 signs have you already identified in your current life? If it was 3 or more, you need to act urgently. And even if it was only 1 or 2, don't ignore them, because these signs rarely appear alone. I bet you've been through at least one of these situations, and probably at the time you had that feeling that something wasn't right, but ended up ignoring it or thinking you were being paranoid. The problem is that when we ignore these signs, we end up being caught by surprise by decisions that could have been anticipated and even influenced if we had paid attention to the warnings. Now that you've identified the signs, the question that demands an answer is, now what do I do? It's no use knowing there's a problem if you don't know how to solve it, right? That's why I'm going to give you 5 practical actions you can start doing today to protect your interests and regain control of the situation. First action, document everything that's happening. What to do? Immediately start writing down all the strange situations you observe, with date, time, who was present, and what exactly happened. How to do it? Grab a notebook or open a file on your phone and write everything down. For example, March 15th, I entered the room and Michael and Jennifer stopped talking abruptly. When I asked what they were talking about, they said it was about Project X, but I noticed they were uncomfortable and quickly changed the subject. Why it works? Documentation serves 2 fundamental purposes. First, it helps you see patterns you might not notice in daily life. Sometimes when we put everything on paper, what's happening becomes much clearer. Second, if you need to confront someone or take more drastic action, you'll have concrete data instead of just impressions. Many people end up doubting their own intuition because they can't prove something strange is happening. With documentation, you create evidence that will give you the confidence to act. Second action, create independent sources of information. What to do? Develop alternative information channels that don't depend on the people who might be hiding things from you. How to do it? At work, this could mean building relationships with people from other departments, talking to colleagues from different teams, or even keeping in touch with former employees who might have insights about what's happening in the company. In family situations, it could mean staying in close contact with relatives who aren't directly involved in decisions, or even with close family friends who might have information. In relationships, it could mean maintaining independent friendships and conversations with people who know your partner from other contexts. When to do it? Immediately, but discreetly. You don't want people to notice you're investigating. Why it works? When you have only one source of information, and that source is compromised, you become completely blind to what's really happening. Independent sources give you different perspectives and information that might not reach you through normal channels. Third action, directly confront the people involved. What to do? Choose 1 or 2 people you consider closest to you and have a direct conversation about your perceptions. How to do it? Pick a moment when you're alone and be straightforward. Michael, I've noticed you've been acting differently toward me lately, and I get the feeling there might be something going on that I don't know about. If there's something I should know, I'd rather you tell me directly. Who to do it with? Only do this with people you truly trust and who have a history of honesty with you. Don't confront everyone at once, because that could end up closing all your information channels at the same time. Expected outcome. One of 2 things will happen. Either the person will open up and tell you what's going on, or they'll deny everything, but you'll be able to read from their reactions whether your suspicions are correct or not. The important thing here is to pay attention, not just to what the person says, but how they react. People who are hiding something usually get nervous, give overly elaborate answers to simple questions, or become defensive, even when you're just asking an honest question. Fourth action, prepare your own alternatives. What to do? Regardless of what you discover, start preparing for different possible scenarios. How to do it? If you suspect there might be problems at work, start updating your resume, making contacts in the market, and researching other opportunities. If the problems might be in the family, start organizing your financial life independently and think about alternative housing if necessary. If they might be in the relationship, Start preparing yourself emotionally and financially for a possible separation. Why it's important? The worst possible scenario is to discover your suspicions were correct and have no alternatives prepared. When you already have plans B, C, and D ready, you're not at the mercy of decisions other people made without consulting you. This doesn't mean you're giving up or being pessimistic. It means you're being smart and protecting yourself. People who prepare for different scenarios always end up in a better position to negotiate and make their own decisions. Fifth action: regain control of your information and decisions. What to do? Stop depending exclusively on others to know what's happening in your own life and start actively seeking information. How to do it? At work, this might mean participating more actively in meetings, asking direct questions about the company's future and your position, and seeking information about the market and other opportunities. In the family, it might mean getting more involved in discussions about finances, health, and future plans, even if initially people try to discourage you. In relationships, it might mean insisting on conversations about the future, shared plans, and financial transparency. Expected outcome: you'll move from the passive position of someone who just receives information to the active position of someone who seeks and demands transparency. This will naturally make it much harder to hide things from you. One important thing: when you start actively seeking information, some people might become uncomfortable and even irritated. This is normal and even expected. People who were used to controlling the flow of information don't like it when you start becoming more independent in this area. Emergency action. If the situation is critical. If you've identified several of these signs and feel an important decision is about to be revealed, do this immediately. Force a clear and direct conversation today. Approach the person or people involved and be completely straightforward. I notice something is going on and that you're avoiding telling me. I'd rather know now, even if it's difficult, than find out later in a worse way. What's happening? Don't accept evasive answers. If the person tries to change the subject, insist, I really need to know what's going on. If there's a decision being made that affects me, I have the right to know. Why do this? Because the longer you wait, the less power you have to influence the situation. Decisions that are already advanced in the process are much harder to change than decisions still being discussed. Now, one very important thing I need to explain to you: not always are these people acting with bad intentions. Often they genuinely believe they're protecting you by hiding information, or that they're doing what's best for you. But the truth is that regardless of intention, when someone makes decisions that affect you without consulting you, it puts you in a position of vulnerability that is neither fair nor healthy. You have the right to be included in decisions that affect your life. You have the right to access information relevant to your own choices. And you have the right to disagree and fight for your interests, even when it's inconvenient for other people. What many people don't understand is that when you exclude someone from important decisions, you're not just making a decision about the specific issue itself. You're making a decision about the kind of relationship you'll have moving forward. You're defining that this is a person whose opinion doesn't matter, whose interests can be ignored, and who can be kept in the dark when convenient. And this applies to all types of relationships. At work, when your boss makes decisions about your career without consulting you, they're defining you as an employee who doesn't deserve transparency or participation in decisions. In family, when your relatives make important decisions without including you, they're defining you as not a family member whose opinions are valued. In romantic relationships, when your partner makes decisions that affect both of you without consulting you, they're defining that you're not truly equal partners. That's why it's so important to act when you identify these signs. It's not just about the specific decision being hidden. It's about the kind of relationship you want to have with these people and the kind of life you want to live. Now, I want you to understand one fundamental thing. Identifying these signs doesn't mean you should become a suspicious and paranoid person. It means you should become a more aware and proactive person in protecting your own interests. The difference between an aware person and a paranoid person is that the aware person seeks information and takes action based on evidence, while the paranoid person imagines unfounded scenarios, and behaves defensively without need. When you document what's happening, seek independent sources of information, confront people when necessary, prepare for different scenarios, and demand transparency in your relationships, you're being aware and proactive. You're protecting your interests in an intelligent and mature way. And here's a truth many people don't like to hear. Not all people in your life have your best interests in mind. This doesn't mean they're bad people or that they want to harm you intentionally. It simply means that when their interests conflict with yours, they will naturally prioritize their own. For example, if the company where you work is facing financial difficulties, it's natural for managers to prioritize the company's survival, even if that means laying people off. If your family is going through problems, it's natural for each person to try to protect their own interests, even if that means making decisions that harm other members. If your relationship is going through problems, it's natural for each person to try to minimize their losses, even if that means not being completely transparent with their partner. This doesn't make these people villains. It makes them normal people acting according to the basic human instinct of self-preservation. But you also have the right and responsibility to act according to your own self-preservation instinct. And part of that self-preservation is being alert to signs that decisions are being made without your knowledge or against your interests. It's refusing to be kept in the dark about matters that affect you. It's demanding transparency in your personal and professional relationships. And it's being prepared to make your own decisions when necessary. One thing I want to make very clear: applying these strategies may reveal truths about your relationships that you might not be prepared to hear. You might discover that people you trusted weren't as transparent as you thought. You might realize that certain relationships were more one-sided than you believed. You might have to make difficult decisions about people who are important in your life. But here's what I've learned after seeing hundreds of people go through these situations. It's always better to know the truth even when it's uncomfortable than to live in an illusion that could collapse at any moment. People who live based on false or incomplete information are always vulnerable to unpleasant surprises. When you know exactly where you're stepping, you can make informed decisions about how you want to proceed. When you don't know, you're always at the mercy of decisions other people made without consulting you. And there's an interesting thing that happens when you start applying these strategies. You naturally attract healthier and more transparent relationships into your life. People who have good intentions and who genuinely care about you will respect your need for transparency and will even value the fact that you're a conscious and proactive person. On the other hand, people who benefit from keeping you in the dark will become uncomfortable with your new stance. And that's great because it helps you identify exactly who the people are that truly deserve to be in your life. Remember, healthy relationships, whether personal or professional, are built on a foundation of mutual respect, transparency, and consideration for the interests of all parties involved. When these characteristics are absent, you don't have a healthy relationship, regardless of how people justify their actions. End. Now you have no more excuses. You know the 5 signs that indicate a wrong decision is being hidden from you, and you know exactly what to do when you identify these signs. Starting today, your life can be completely different if you put these actions into practice. And if this video gave you the tools you needed, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell because we have many other valuable tips for you. In the comments, tell me, which of these actions will you start doing first? And if you've already been through any of these situations, share the outcome with us.